Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You've reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that dares to dig just a little bit deeper. It is Thursday, March 3rd, 2022, and tonight we are kicking off the 69th meeting of the No Name Cinema Society, starting as we always do with our current feature, which tonight is the film Cyrano from director Joe Wright, which opened last Friday. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, and this is the final series of regular season episodes of our 7th season. I'm here in my home in Los Angeles, home of the world champion Los Angeles Rams, which you might be able to see over my right shoulder there. Speaking of world champions, let me introduce my co-host for the evening. First, a witty, loving poet slash sound designer with self-esteem issues, Maddie Bolas is here.
Hello, Jonathan.
Hey, Maddie, how you doing? Good to see you. Thanks for coming along. And also with us, ladies and gentlemen, is a ridiculously handsome soldier with a limited vocabulary. Patrick Taylor's here.
I don't have the words. No, I don't. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. So, interestingly enough, guys, these two guys will also be the co-hosts with me for the top 10 films of 2021. Even if they liked Cyrano, which I don't know if they did or didn't yet, they won't reveal tonight if it made their list. You'll have to wait 19 days for that. Here is, you'll have to wait a few days for our next show, however, which will be our Indie Spotlight coming up on Monday. This is the schedule for the rest of our episodes for this, our 69 series episodes, starting, of course, tonight, continuing on Monday with our Indie Spotlight, Tony Erdmann, which is a German film from 2016. A week from tonight, March 10th, will be our classic movie discussion of the film from 1947, The Bachelor and the Bobby Soxer, starring Cary Grant and Shirley Temple. And on March 14th will be our 53rd Sound Off. Maddie Polis will be back with that. Devin will be there as well, and he will do his diatribe. I have an announcement, and we'll be counting down my top 5 father-daughter films of all time. Maddie Polis, you excited about that show coming up?
Sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, we'll be doing that on March 14th. It's time for drinking. Is anybody drinking with me, guys?
Got a little decaf.
Little decaf, that doesn't count. Coffee doesn't count. We need alcohol. Patrick, you usually have alcohol.
I'm not home today, so I don't have some, though my dad does have a very nice bar, but I just didn't bring it upstairs, and it's 3 floors down. I'm not going to get it.
That's a lot of floors. I've got Goose Island. So the audience and me will drink together here with our Goose Island situation. So that's kind of exciting. And those of you at home like to play our drinking game, whenever we do one of these things in the show is when you drink. Anytime I say contrived, contrivance, all time, verisimilitude, or diegesis, anytime Matt makes fun of me, or anytime Patrick can't remember the name of a movie or an actor, that's when you guys drink at home, and I'll be drinking by myself here. Cheers to you out the audience. Patrick and Matt are left out in the cold. So there's no incentive for Matt to be making fun of me tonight. So maybe that's a bonus for me.
I've never needed it in the past, Jonathan.
I guess that's true. Are you guys ready for summary?
Let's do it.
All right, then we're going to roll right into it. But who doesn't know the story of Cyrano? Cyrano loves his close friend Roxanne, but is afraid to tell her. She is in love with a handsome Christian who doesn't have the words to communicate his love in return. And so a deal is struck. Cyrano will provide the words for Christian, and Cyrano finally has an outlet to profess his love without embarrassing himself. Is that summary okay, guys? Pretty basic?
Sure.
Pretty basic. Yep.
All right, it's time for opening thoughts, and I'm going to let Patrick go first. He's usually pretty brief with opening thoughts. 1 sentence or less. Patrick, how'd you feel about Cyrano?
A great vehicle for Peter Dinklage to act in.
We'll dig into that a little further potentially. Maddie P, you got to see it at a screener a few weeks ago, so it's less fresh in your memory, but what'd you think?
I think it's a classic reimagined as a musical where the music is the least interesting thing about it.
And for me, my opening thought is this was a big swing that for me missed the barrel of the bat, resulting in a foul tip. So guys, we're sort of mostly on the same page. Patrick sounds like he might have liked it the most, maybe Matt, I don't know. Maybe I liked it the least. Well, I guess we'll figure it out as we go along. We always like to start positive, and so I'm going to start with the thing I like the most about it, and that is the direction for me. Guys, I first became acquainted with Joe Wright back in 2005 with his adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, a tired story that he breathed life into in smart and unexpected ways. I immediately thought that this was a filmmaker to keep an eye on. None of his subsequent films have matched the success and spirit of that film, but they've all been good, strong cinematic works, just not as good or fluid. I'm referring to films like Atonement, Anna Karenina, Hannah, good films that aren't great films or as great as Pride and Prejudice. I sort of feel similar about this film. He clearly knows how to make a movie. The choices and tools are all there. I love the overall look of the film, the warmth of the city versus the bleak, desaturated battlefield. Shot selection was once again on point. He used frame within a frame, use of foreground, background, high angle, low angle kind of stuff. The long takes that he is famous for, the best scene in the whole film for me, didn't really feature any of the main players. The Whenever I Fall number, all done in a single shot, fluidly, going from person to person, starting with the famous singer Glenn Hansard to the other soldiers, never losing pace or emotion. Some, not all, but some of the montages during the songs got a little silly. All the slow motion flying paper from the notes is an example that bumped for me. Another thing that he's very good at is blocking. Principals and extras move through the scenes with a grace required of a musical. There's an entropy about the crowd scenes that's very cinematic. The actors manage to find their way into great frames smoothly and naturally. As I've said in the show many times, blocking for camera is a lost art, and I think this is a master class.
I'm glad you called out the camera moves and the fluid long shots. Those work pretty well. The crowd control, I like that as well. There's a lot of people in this movie, and I didn't think about it in particular till now, but I am appreciating that sort of direction, the corralling of all those people. It was very fluid.
Patrick, what did you think of the direction?
I thought the direction was great. I think I could have done without the dancing. A lot of that was a little weird to me. The big scenes, the kind of the big wides. When you saw Peter with Haley looking at each other from down the balcony and him down below, and they're both in focus. I thought that was a great use of just like that split screen that you couldn't really tell it was a kind of a split screen camera.
It's a diopter.
Do you think it was a diopter, or do you think it was like they just cropped the two images together?
I think it was a diopter because there's that little bit of like,
I didn't see the defocus little area.
Focus in the middle.
Okay, I didn't see it because there was that wall in the middle, so I didn't see it.
Cleverly staged in that sense to hide the line in the diopter in the walls. That shot stood out to me as well. That was one of the foreground background shots I was referring to. So, and just so the audience knows, Patrick, who usually forgets the actors' names, now has a cheat sheet. He's, instead of saying Cyrano and Roxanne, he's referring to the actors by their first name.
No one will drink on my behalf today. Okay.
All right. Yeah, he's ready.
I did find the fight sequences. I can't remember all of them, but the kind of first one that tries to show Cyrano as kind of a tough guy, I thought it was pretty silly. On camera was silly, and then there was like an off camera thing where he leaves and everyone's like suddenly flying off the bridge. It would seem like a comedy moment, but I think it wasn't supposed to be. I mean, it was supposed to maybe a little silly, but it didn't read to me as authentic or tough at all.
I think I know the scene that you're talking about. I think what I consider the first scene is the one that's on stage.
Yeah,
that I think that works for me. That first scene, I thought that was well shot. That next scene, which is vengeance for what happens on the stage, that moment where he goes off camera and then all of a sudden is heroic, that did bump for me as well.
Yeah, that's the exact scene I mean. That moment was a kind of a sore spot within a sore scene, but the entire scene was like, it just didn't read. That one just stood out to me as a little weird because it was establishing the whole tone of the character and what it's capable of, and just didn't work for me.
I didn't have a problem with the choreography itself.
Well, believability, I guess is what I don't know what to call it.
Yeah, I mean, especially given his size, the idea that he could best these men, I think we need to see it. First time we see it, okay, he's a good swordsman, but then he has to take on 10 at a time. If you want us to accept that he's this master swordsman, I think we need to see a little more of it. That was my feeling, and it sounds like that you're heading in that direction as well.
Yeah, I thought that first scene on stage was cool. It really showed that he was a slick swordsman and that he could have wit while besting somebody. The next scene was a little unbelievable.
As we move on to performances, I'm going to disagree with Patrick a little bit, because for me, the performance of the movie is actually Haley Bennett as Roxanne. When we reviewed the film The Girl in the Train, episode 34.1, in which Haley Bennett was again the object of desire, I confessed my exorbitant crush on her, but acknowledged she was not strong in admittedly what was a terrible movie. But in this film, she proved herself to me with this performance. She takes advantage of the script, which provides her with an improved, more fleshed out, and stronger Roxanne. She's more than just a pretty face in this film. She's imperious and determined, loving and sweet, manipulative and even childish at times, All those things are performed with a strong commitment by Bennett, which provides us with a flawed heroine that we can get behind. Guys, I've got Haley Bennett here, who really stood out to me in a surprising way. I don't expect a lot from the character of Roxanne, but I thought she was particularly notable.
Yeah, I thought she was great. I actually thought the acting was one of the stronger parts of the film. I don't disagree with what you're saying about her. The character, though, which is different than the acting, felt a little too focused on the letters and words and what she wants to hear every day, but she pulled it out. She's good.
That to me has always been a flaw of like the source material. Even from a youth, that has always bothered me in terms of like whole concept not gelling as much. But that I am confident does come from the source material. What are you laughing at? What did I do?
Just as a youth, I remember as a youth thinking about Cyrano all the time.
Oh, I read it, as a preteen or young teenager. Patrick, Haley Bennett.
It's the problems I have with her is not her. She did a great job. It was how annoying she particularly was. Just like Maddie is saying about, like, he said he loved her, and then she didn't even care that he said that to her face. She's like, she wants him to say all these beautiful words. Stop being selfish.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's why I think I said she was a little bit childish. I agree with that, but I think she played that well.
Right.
Established that this character hasn't really fully grown up yet. You know what I mean?
Right. She's looking for something. Yeah. So my problem is not with her; it's with the screenplay. But yes, she did a phenomenal job, and her singing was great, and the emotion that she gives in each scene, it was believable.
It seems like Matt, we're going to open the can of worms on Peter Dinklage, who's obviously the lead in this movie. It's the titular character. It's a famous role. It's a role that has won an Oscar historically in the 50s and has been nominated in other times that people have played it. So it's a very famous character in literature history. So it's a great opportunity in that sense. I've met Peter Dinklage through some friends on Homecoming, which is a film that Matt Patrick's seen, as Matt worked on back in the day, my feature. I've seen Peter Dinklage on stage. He is unquestionably, to me, an outstanding actor and has some beautiful moments in this film. But perhaps the most frustrating flaw to me in this film overall is that, to me, his singing voice is just not up to what I think the songs require. Many have been willing to overlook that. It sounds like these guys might be willing to overlook that. But the songs in the film are meant to provide the juice, the emotion that was meant to envelop us and carry us through on a cloud. He's not a singer, and it showed. They clearly manipulated the orchestration to compensate, but to me, it wasn't enough. It was a distraction and a disservice to the songs themselves, though Maddie said he didn't like the songs. Additionally, there were a few moments towards the end that I felt like he overplayed a tad. It's tricky with such heightened material, but I've seen him do Shakespeare. It shouldn't have been a problem for him. None of that, though, is as egregious as the problem with the singing for me. Patrick came on the show saying Peter Dinklage was a highlight for him. He was a bit of a bump for me, but mainly because of the singing, Patrick.
I took the singing off the table because the songs were just not memorable for me. I'm sure you remember some of these songs, JB.
2 or 3 in particular.
And he wasn't even involved in the ones that you probably liked.
It's true. A lot of that has to do with them manipulating the orchestration in order to get his sort of stilty bass. It was shifted to make it easier for him. I think that's why those songs, they're not as musical, because they had to sort of adjust it to his voice.
He kind of rapped the first thing. It was kind of spoken word.
It's called sing speaking. It's something that happens every now and then in musicals when you want to have a star do a song. Richard Burton in Camelot, for example, not that you would know that, Patrick, but maybe a reference that you might know better is Russell Crowe in Les Mis. They sort of like speak their way through the songs because they can't really hit the notes as much, but it's awkward. You want to have these stars do these roles. If you want to do a musical, like, you should really have singers 9 times out of 10.
Actually, this is an interesting topic. Patrick being a composer, me being a sound engineer, it could be an interesting little thing here, because there's different kind of musicals. Most musicals are like this. We have like a song that's pre-produced and then they lip sync it on set. And it just sort of sounds like you're leaving the movie and you're entering into a song. There's no attempt to make it seem like it's a natural part of the diegesis. Then there's the ones in the middle, which this is kind of like. It's not as big of a production. You can sort of make believe that they're singing in the moment. And then there's the one that you just called out, Les Mis, where that was famous at the time, you may remember, for actually recording the singing on set as dialogue, which is super challenging to do. But it's worthwhile in the sense that it's super authentic. They're actually saying and they're whispering and they're singing and they're not lip syncing, and it's not super produced. It's got this different vibe to it. This is kind of in the middle, not for all the songs, but Peter's in particular, I took it to be the middle ground. He's not a singer, so maybe the idea is he's not jumping into performance mode. He's sort of singing because it's a musical and he's participating in the production, but they're not breaking character as much as they could if they sort of burst into orchestration every single time. Now, this film is kind of like in the middle, like I said. It definitely has orchestration and songs that are separate from it, but it's within the world. And with his voice, it's so bare and so raw that I did not like it personally, but it kind of, from a high level intellectual sense, works because he's just kind of like this guy who's singing. So he shouldn't be like a Broadway star, and he's not in this movie. And it does stand out. I agree. I don't like it, and it's so raw and the lyrics are so clear and crisp. For me, when I hear music and lyrics, I kind of like lose track of the lyrics. I get the sense the whole thing is a mood. For him, it's just lyric, and it felt super cheesy because every word was exactly out in the open. But there is a sort of spin for maybe some intention behind it.
It definitely sounds like a spin. It's interesting that you sort of thought it through to that level. I didn't go that far, but it sounds like you found it. You made it work for you.
I did not like it, to be clear, but I'm like, well, should I just blame them for it, or should I sort of give them the benefit of the doubt?
He's a great actor, though, and honestly, ton of scenes where he's not singing. He has some beautiful moments when Roxanne first tells him that she's in love with Christian. That hangdog face of his just like melts. Beautiful moments. I am distracted by the singing.
I didn't come to this movie thinking that Peter Dinklage was going to blow me away with his voice. I came thinking that he was going to blow me away with his acting ability and his ability to convey emotion. I didn't even know it was a musical. Once people started singing, I was like, it's a musical. Damn you, JB. But I really...
How do you not know that it's a musical? Every trailer.
I didn't know either.
I stopped watching trailers because I don't want to have the trailer ruin it for me. Whenever you say watch a movie, I just come to the movie and turn it on. And
God bless you.
Yeah, it's kind of a good way to watch a movie, right? I don't bring anything. And then when he started singing, I was like, okay, let's get through this and let's get to the emotion that I know you're going to give me. Do I think that his singing worked? No. The rest of the cast's singing worked. I came here to see the drama. I didn't come for the dancing.
That's going to be on his tombstone. That's his epitaph.
Actually, I came for the dancing, not the drama. On my tombstone.
Spinning around for the tombstone. All right, we have one other performance here to talk about, the third member of this love triangle. I saw Kelvin Harrison Jr. a couple years ago in a film called Luce, Luce, and I felt like he was pretty bland. And that's kind of what I get from him here. I still don't connect with him much at all as an actor. There doesn't seem to be anything going on underneath the eyes. I didn't believe his love for her or his friendship with Cyrano. He's a good-looking dude, but he lacks the charisma I would hope for in this role. Patrick, Kelvin Harrison Jr.
He was in this show called Godfather of Harlem as a singer. I knew him as a singer. He had one song that I was like, okay, he's giving me the business. He's giving me his vocal range. Acting-wise, he's just a pretty boy and he didn't really do that much, but he didn't mess it up. I didn't think he was a standout.
I would say, knowing the source material, like I expected a little more from that role. I'm going to talk about the adaptation soon, and they did some things that does take away from the spirit of the role. I think, to your point, maybe he had less opportunity.
I agree with what you said about there not being much there, and I think that's a problem because we have to believe that they need to be together. But you also can't forget that she's not being with him for what we see on screen. She's being with him for what he writes, which is not apparent on screen. It's kind of a problem with the movie.
What I said was I don't believe his love for her.
It goes both ways, and it's kind of a flaw in the movie, I'm realizing now, because we can't be shown why she loves him. We're just told intellectually by the other letters. I don't see the connection between them. So the whole thing feels a little implausible to me. I also think that he doesn't seem dumb enough. He seems like a smart guy. He just doesn't write poetry. I think that he needs to be dumber.
Matty P, I'm going to give you one of these. That you've earned the bingo. I have that coming up in the next section. I don't think that's a character thing, though, because I think that's a part of the adaptation. I think that's exactly on point and a significant problem with the movie. It sounds like it's a good segue to screenplay. We've been leading up to this most of the show. We've already talked about it a little bit. And so my confession to you guys is, while there's a lot of classic literature that I love, there's a lot that I feel that's overrated. And this lands in that latter category, kind of like how I feel about Romeo and Juliet, and by extension, both West Side Stories. Even when first experiencing the story of Cyrano de Bergerac in high school, I felt the plot was tenuous at best, asking us to swallow a lot of disbelief and asking us to believe that Roxanne is kind of a moron, to not see through this charade. Different versions have tried to make this a little more palatable with varying degrees of success, including Steve Martin's version from 1987, Roxanne. I thought that was a little more successful in making the shenanigans work, or the ruse, if you will. This adaptation is something of a mixed bag on that front. I already discussed the improvement in the character of Roxanne. She's not just the object of affection anymore. She's got dimension and intelligence, which makes me buy this basic scenario even less. I feel strongly that the character as established would see through the charade so much sooner than she did. He wrote every day, and she knows Cyrano so well. In the beginning, I can see her believing what she wanted to believe, but from that amount of letters from someone she knows very well, I continue to struggle. To Matt's point, the character of Christian is less of an idiot than he is often portrayed. He's not dumb here. He's just not good with words, and vocabulary. It's an interesting choice, but I also find it disingenuous in the context of the story. The scenario from the original is on thin ice to begin with, and the changes made in the adaptation didn't help that for me. Maddie Polis, source material in the adaptation, what do you think?
Yeah, it wasn't believable. You're right. She would not have been fooled unless she really, really, really wanted to. And I guess they kind of established she was really ready for this kind of relationship, but I don't know. It's a tough sell. Also, because they're kind of bumbling around a lot. Like that's part of the comedy is how they almost screw up a lot. And I don't think she would have not noticed that.
Once Cyrano starts speaking, and she's like, your octave changed, that jumped the shark for me.
That one scene where Cyrano is obviously pouring out his love in front of him, Christian's an idiot. So I disagree with what you guys are saying.
Well, but I would say that is a continuity error of the movie, not a representation of his character's intelligence.
Agreed.
The fact that Roxanne has never seen his handwriting before is a problem. It's kind of a silly movie.
And I guess my point is the book itself is I've always felt it was kind of silly, Maddie.
Oh, nothing else to add. I mean, it is a very silly movie, but it's just a retelling of the same thing. So if you don't buy into the original, you're not going to buy into this one. Other ones have been a little more subtle with that stuff.
I'm going to include this in the sort of screenplay adaptation section. And it sounds like I'm going to disagree with Maddie now, because as much as I complained about some of the singing, I did like the songs themselves, me personally, at least a handful of them. The lyrics and music I thought were well crafted, full of earned emotion, and very evocative when the singers were able to give them their due. Patrick sort of made a reference to that in the sense that the songs that Peter Dinklage sang are the ones that are less memorable to me. The song I'd Give Anything was mainly fronted by Haley Bennett, and also Wherever I Fall song with the three soldiers led by Glenn Hansard from Once. If you guys have seen the movie Once from 2007, he's an Oscar-winning songwriter himself. That whole number, all done in one shot, was a gorgeous song, beautifully written and executed. And I think the Peter Dinklage songs too might have been better. It could have been better if he weren't the voice behind them. I don't mean to be cruel, Maddie.
I use that song, the battle song that you're talking about, as evidence to me that it's not the songwriter's fault, but the execution, because that shows me they can make beautiful music and it can be executed beautifully. And I love that song. I love that scene. But that wasn't the vast majority. Those are the exceptions to what I saw as the overall mood of the music was underwhelming, forgettable, and a lot of time distractingly bad. Those two songs show that they can do it.
The song I Want More stood out to me well. And again, it's Haley Bennett landed that song nicely. Patrick, the songs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, obviously the singing of Peter wasn't great. They didn't help him out with big orchestral numbers. A lot of it was kind of intimate. Nothing was big and fun. It was all kind of emotional, milky kind of.
They didn't have one of those big Broadway dance-a-thon, kind of numbers.
But that would have been silly. I think that back to my point. I don't want to defend it because I also didn't like it, but that would have been so silly if they did give him a big Broadway number.
All right, guys, it's time for your favorite segment. What's coming up next, guys? Who wants to do it first? There it is. What's it called?
The T-word.
It's called the T-word. This is where we talk about the themes of the film. Davey, the founder of the show, used to hate talking about themes. It's a little too heady for him. Didn't want to talk about it. So whenever we did talk about it, we called it the T-word. So we didn't say the word themes, and a segment was born. The story is timeless and been done 1,000 times. Classic literature. So the themes are sort of obvious. Timeless appeal of the story harkens back to the old maxim, don't judge a book by its cover. So appearances are at the heart of Cyrano de Bergerac. As simplistic and obvious as that sounds, it's an old piece, so it's to be expected. But it's still a lesson that could use occasional reminders. Whether a dwarf like in this version, or having a large nose like in most previous versions, or a hunchback like in another similarly minded old story, or for those that struggle with weight, or if you're just plain ugly like myself, those that look different still get marginalized in our society. Some have suggested that there is an instinctual human reaction, almost a fear, to anything or anyone that looks different or unusual. Whether that's true or not, it's stories like this that educate that generation, this generation, and the generations to come to look deeper in people. I'm starting with the obvious basic one. Sorry to disappoint you, Patrick. Appearances is a theme in Cyrano.
Yeah, that is the obvious one. So thank you.
What am I going to do? not mention it as a theme? I mean, it is the theme of the movie. Like, I've got another one, but still.
Wait. This is the review show that digs a little deeper. You got to give me something else, bro. What are you doing?
Will give you something else. I just felt I had to start out with like the basic one. Do you have anything to add?
Yes. Well, yes. With your appearance or with any man, shoot your shot. Okay. And with a guy like this, that's my T word. It kind of builds on yours. Like, if you are ugly or fat or something, it's a numbers game. Like, everybody's not gonna like you. You have to use your words. You have to shoot your shot. And if you do it and you fail, at least you tried. That is one of the bigger ideas that I think for the film.
Matty P, appearances.
So you said appearances. Also, don't judge a book by its cover. I think that's different because here, was he really judged for his size? In fact, they make it a point to say he's not small. He's larger than life. He's smart. He's capable physically. She certainly cares for him. Everyone around him seems to respect him. I don't know if he's judged by his cover.
It's interesting that you make that point, but he assumes that he is.
Right. It's like an internal don't judge yourself by your own cover, because in this movie, he's not judged by that theoretical flaw. It's not part of it.
That's true of Roxanne. It does seem to appear that the society in general was less open-minded to dwarfs or anybody that looked odd or whatever. I mean, you hear the name calling at the theater initially, but I think the society in general is a little less sophisticated in that regard. That's the picture that I saw painted. So you're saying it's almost about self-esteem in that sense.
Yes.
But I mean, like, that comes from someplace. If he wasn't ridiculed ever in his life, I don't think he'd still have that same complex.
I mean, maybe not. I mean, there's imposter syndrome is pretty powerful, and it's sort of a close cousin of that.
Certainly, at this point in his life, he is often his own worst enemy, making assumptions of how other people will see him.
Totally agree.
I can agree with that. So now, Patrick, my other theme is not groundbreaking. This version seems to be a little bit more about this. You probably can't see the little tagline on the poster, but it says, "Have you ever loved someone?" And this iteration seems to really lean on that a little bit. It's almost like an ode to love in all of its forms. Almost all the characters in this film are preoccupied with love in some way, whether it's a long-lasting infatuation from childhood, love at first sight, or love based on vanity, or love of a father or colleague. Almost all the characters' choices are based on whichever love applies to them. It's the only motivation in the film based on how they define it, they being the characters. At the same time, it seems to me that as freely as that word is thrown around, they are all grappling to understand what it really is. They all cling on to the fairy tale kind of love that Cyrano describes in his poems, and any alternative just isn't good enough. But this version in particular seems to debunk that more than others. The love at first sight feels baseless and hollow, as Patrick mentioned earlier. Ben Mendelsohn's character confuses love with lust. And the one potential love with any foundation is hindered by fear and pride. Which brings me to the point that I think the final scene makes, and that's life is too short to hold that back. To live is to love, and vice versa. So don't keep those letters in the drawer or that email in the draft folder. Choose love over fear. Hell, that's why I moved to LA in the first place. Didn't work out, but that result is better than a life of wondering and regretting. So maybe this is a little better theme, guys. An exploration of love.
I like that. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly right. Every character is preoccupied with that. I think every scene in the movie has to do about love, and even the battle scene, which they're singing about the song we both love. It's about love.
Well, I mean, and also one of the nicer touches of the movie that I liked is in that opening song, random background people start to walk in and sing along too. They too are looking for love. We never see them again. We see them for a brief bit. So just like random people in the background, everyone has this need, this search for love, as if life itself was all about the search for love. Patrick?
Yeah, I think love is at the center of the film for sure. It's a romance. That's what it is, yeah.
All right, guys, we're not sure when the 8th season will begin, May or June sometime, but we can tell you, as we've intimated, in just 19 days, we're going to start releasing our biggest shows that we do all year, the finale episodes that we do Oscar week annually. Here's a schedule starting on Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, with both of these gentlemen, Matt Polis, Patrick, and I will be counting down our top 10 films of 2021. The following night, March 23rd, Devin and Jim will be with me to go over the Oscar races and our Oscar preview of this year. And the biggest show of all, we travel back in time to 1986 for our 1986 in review with Kelly and Max, and that'll be on Thursday, March 24th, 2022. We're all very excited for the big finale episodes. But before that, we got to finish this, our 69 series episodes, and this continues on Monday with our Indie Spotlight, another movie from my top 10 films of 2016, as we're looking at indies from 2016 this year. It's a German film, Tony Erdmann, and that's coming up just this Monday with Max and Devin. Put that on your calendar. All right, guys, time to say goodnight to the audience.
Good night.
Good night, audience.
Very good. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.